And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the New York Information Security Meetup, the largest information security, independent information security in the country. I have a special episode today. Very, very excited to have this. For adversaries, Christmas has come early, and Log4Shell is their golden goose, continuously laying golden eggs. Hackers are discovering multiple ways to use the vulnerability to gain access to the network like never before. The vulnerability now assigned as CVE 20214428 is easily exploitable, and nearly any input that is eventually logged by the Log4j2 logger will interpret the user input, causing the application to reach out to a malicious JNDI server and potentially execute arbitrary Java code. Just as Java, the language, is of possibilities, Log4Shell is the vulnerabilities of possibilities. I have the really great pleasure to introduce Snehal Antani, who is the entrepreneur, technologist, and investor. He's the CEO and co-founder of Horizon 3, as well as Antani Tony P Pillitiere, who's the co-founder and CTO for Horizon 3. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining.
Hey, thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
It's been an absolutely crazy time, especially for anybody who is in the security space. I can't stress this enough. It almost created almost like a wave of shock throughout this industry, right? So why don't we get started? And you both have absolutely incredible backgrounds, just to kind of establish the clout of what you've done and why people should listen to you, people who are in the industry who do not know you. Maybe we can start with that. Who wants to start first?
I'll start with the origin story and then how Tony P and I found each other here. So my background, I'm a developer by trade, but I was a CIO at GE Capital. Then I was the CTO at Splunk and helped grow and scale that company. And then at Splunk, I took a break from industry to serve within national security and within the U.S. Special Operations community. And it was in my time in special operations that I met Tony, who is an airman within the special operations world. And he and I worked together to solve some really hard problems, including securing, operating, defending our network, amongst other things. And so 3 years of working together in a very high stress, no-fail environment that is the special operations world was a great way to knock out the founder risk. So when we actually started a company together, it's been not only fun, but easier than expected because we've got a bunch of time working together. And that's our origin story, at least for he and I. And then I'll have Tony talk about the pain and the opportunity that we saw together that justified or warranted us trying to take a new approach with Horizon 3.
Yeah, thanks, Snehal. That was great. And yeah, it's really been fun working with you over these past 3, 4, 5 years together. I'm Tony P, CTO and co-founder at Horizon 3.ai. I spent 21 years in the service, and most of that time was in what some people call the black world, but it's really just selectively manned organizations with highly sensitive missions. And the last one that I was in was within the special operations community, where I was brought up as the deputy chief technology officer to really help drive how data was leveraged within special operations and change the mindset from it being those with the biggest guns and who can shoot the best, excuse me, to how do we leverage data in order to better fight and win wars or prevent wars and get more left of bang. And the future, I think it's pretty clear now that the future of warfare will be won and prevented by those who can leverage technology and information better. So during our time there, we solved a lot of really hard problems and helped a lot of folks, and also took care of a lot of bad problems in the world. So it was really fun. And then we started this thing, and it has just been a rocket ship. And we're really trying to help organizations get more secure by using the find, fix, verify loop, which is what we call it, and we'll talk about it. And it's using offense to inform defense so that you are better postured to understand how to fix things within your environment better.
It's amazing. I always, when I always hear stories of entrepreneurs that have come across a problem throughout their careers before founding a business and creating a company, and it's mainly because they come across a big problem that no one else solved, and it's truly evident that this is what you two are doing. And I interviewed a CISO this week who mentioned that specifically the way they gain knowledge of new advantages in the cybersecurity space is by working with people like yourself, entrepreneurs in space, because that's what you do. You advance the information security space, cybersecurity space, and you do that every day. So why don't we get started and maybe talk a bit about the vulnerability? What created that shock? Java has been around for so many years. And specifically, this library, the logging library, has been around since quite some time. What caused this type of vulnerability to happen? And maybe you can jump into this whole open source thing that is plaguing the industry.
Go for it, Tony.
Yeah. So one thing I want to do is it was CVE 2021-44228. And it is now that one was patched, and people should have been patching it. The newest one that just came out is 2021-45046, and that just got upgraded from a low because from a low up to a critical now because they have found remote code execution. But just a kind of quick overview of what's going on. I hope a lot of folks are already up to date on it, but we'll just kind of peruse over it. For context, researcher at Alibaba found that they could leverage an underlying library in Java that is used to do logging. So lots and lots of applications across the world are using this particular library underneath. And when you send inputs to a web interface or you send inputs into it, anything that gets logged, when it goes through this logging mechanism, it has the ability to get enriched. Developers use these things to save on code and to save on the ability to bring more information into their logging so that they can understand what's going on within an application. And that enrichment exposed this vulnerability. And so now you can inject data into the logging, not the application itself. The application may work fine, but when it goes into the logging, it actually does more interpretation of it, and it brings more information out, and it allowed the attacker to call out to external sources to get more information. Well, that has allowed us to pull in malware and now be able to do remote code execution so that we can extract variables. We can leverage the host as a pivot point. And the big news about this is the fact that so many applications are leveraging this particular library. And Snehal, I'll let you kind of go over the next pieces of it, but I'll talk through a little bit more generically on how technology was built and how this problem is going to be ubiquitous for a really long time, and how there are other places where this might become a problem as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that. And one thing I mentioned is that this broadcast is live, is mainly unscripted. I'm monitoring if somebody has any questions, the viewers right now, we'd be happy to answer this live on air here. Snehal.
Yeah. So to Tony's point, when good developers would log, and having been the CTO at Splunk, logging was pretty valuable and important to the entire concept, anyways. But as you would enrich, you could do lookups, and then those lookups you could route malicious lookups and then inject malicious code. So the reason why this is especially interesting and dangerous is kind of one, if you think about Java applications in general, think of the middleware space, the WebSphere, WebLogic, Tomcat, Kix Web Services on the mainframe, WebSphere ZOS on the mainframe. You can run JVMs in your DB2 ZOS instances as well. So a lot of these Java-based applications tended to run within the trusted zone of the network, and within the trusted zone, oftentimes on highly trusted systems. So what I think is going to be the longer tail of interesting attack is going to be, for the first time, maybe ever, or in a long time, there is a way to get remote code execution in your authorized Kix region on a very sensitive platform that is the mainframe running your high volume transactions for banking, insurance, financial services, and so on. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. To Tony's point, you've got Java-based applications running all over the place, provided both custom applications you've developed, in which case you can upgrade the logging framework, but lots of commercial off-the-shelf applications where these logging frameworks could be embedded in there, and you either don't know about it or it's not easily upgradable. And so, this is going to be, I think, the start of a 10x fold in CVEs that get generated just around this problem for every single product that's got this logging component embedded within it.
It's also interesting that this is in the basic, problem is a data validation, right? So it looks almost like a SQL injection, excuse me, and other forms of malicious execution. And so we've seen that before with, various type of technologies. And so this whole patching problem has been around since the end, the beginning of the internet, right? So, and this is just another manifestation of it, right?
Yeah. I'll say, Tony can dive into more. I love the SQL injection analogy because, you're not exploiting a vulnerability in your actual application code itself. You just like when in a SQL injection attack, you're not necessarily exploiting the database. You're exploiting an interface to that database. So here, you're able to bypass a whole bunch of security checks and controls, just like you would in SQL injection. You're able to get access to really sensitive data, or at least set the conditions for access to sensitive data. Think of your Hadoop environment or anything else. But Tony's got a couple of really good examples on how this isn't just about Java applications. There are ways to exploit Log4j through non-Java means and techniques also.
Yeah, what we found through running Node Zero, our product, we found that we were able to send crafted headers and crafted requests to these web applications that were non-Java based web applications. But what's happening is when you send it to that particular application, those applications are then offloading information to another system within a set of systems. So for instance, I have a web interface that's running, non-Java based stuff. The information then gets passed to Logstash, which is Java based. And when it gets passed back into the trusted zone, it then initiates, and we were receiving the callback, the response, so that we could validate this. The callback is the response so that we could validate that the vulnerability was there and exploitable. That's the key term there, is exploitable. It was coming from a system inside the environment, which is something that I haven't seen a whole lot of people talking about. A lot of people are talking about, hey, make sure you're checking your external Java-based web applications and your Java-based stuff. Yes, you need to do that. And I appreciate everybody doing that. But you have to remember that it's not just about the internet-facing stuff. It's also about how are the systems of systems integrated, and where are they sending this information? Because it is possible to leverage the attack from the internet, have it show up and call back from inside the environment. It's really important for people to understand that.
Yeah, if I double click on that, think of you've got a collection of microservices. Each of those microservices could be written in Ruby or whatever other language you care about. But in each of those microservices, they're all going to be pushing data to some centralized logging service. That centralized logging service, if it's Logstash, is Java-based. So while the actual internet-facing applications aren't vulnerable, when they route their requests and other troubleshooting information to that centralized logging service, that is where you're going to get the callback, and then the attacker's going to get initial access. So now what you have to look at is all of the flows of data and where they land in different parts of your environment. So that's why this isn't just a single CVE that you can easily patch, because you've got all sorts of paths within your services architecture, service 1 calling service 2, calling service 3. Only one of them has to be able to pass their data to some Log4j vulnerable environment for this compromise to occur.
Yeah, and it's really super interesting. So what you just described is the kind of enormity of the problem, right? And there are also other misconceptions. For example, the ability to, as you mentioned, to verify very quickly using like pen testing, right? So because of the functionality of it being basically a logging, logging doesn't necessarily happen instantaneously, right? So you can, quote unquote, trying to figure out if a system is vulnerable, but it will take maybe even a few hours to maybe even a day for it to call back, right? Is that true?
I don't usually when you log, you're pretty good and fast about getting the logs flushed out of the buffer to the logging service quickly. So I don't think it's going to be a few hours. I think it's 10, 20, 30 seconds, maybe more than that. But in a high volume web application, 20 seconds is an eternity. 30 seconds is an eternity. So it becomes even harder to call back. Another interesting thing that we found, and how Tony talked more about it, is one approach people took to defending against this was taking their internet-facing applications and putting it behind some single sign-on provider like an Okta or whatever, thinking that would protect them. But like any good application developer, you are logging all of your requests and all of your interactions, and so attackers are able to bypass Okta altogether and just ping the APIs directly, and then those APIs will log that they got pinged, even though it was a request that got dropped. They still log the dropped request, and then once you log that dropped request, it gets enriched, and through that enrichment process in Log4j, you're able to load malicious classes and then go off and execute. So I don't know, Tony, if you want to talk more about other defenses that have been insufficient so far.
Yeah, I'll go back to the question about logging and how long does it take to log and all that stuff. I think this plays into the idea that you need to be looking at the environment with the attacker's eyes more recurringly. A lot of the stuff that's coming out, a lot of the checks that are coming out right now, other than knowing where all of your Log4j instances are, is a lot of these tests and attacks that are going on are spray and pray, meaning they're going to send a bunch of crafted requests, headers, and different requests to these applications to see, and then they wait, right? And this, if you saw, I got my, I'm not going to share it. I'm trying to remember where that. I think it was on Gray Noise. Gray Noise has got some great stuff up right now. They showed how when this started and when things started to come out, and how much traffic was going out on via these IP addresses to scan the internet for Log4j. And what they're doing is they're just sending a bunch of crafted things to header injections. They're looking for forms, and they're going to start spraying the JNDI stuff in there. This is going to be a long tail. So continuously checking yourself, both externally and internally, to understand, because there's going to be a lot of new checks coming out. There's going to be a lot of new WAF bypasses that are coming out. They're coming out extremely quickly. So doing this on a more recurring basis is really, really important, which ties into kind of what our philosophy is if you're not looking at yourself with the eyes of an attacker, you're going to be missing a lot. As attacks continue to change over time, and this is going to be happening for a really long time, you're going to want to keep trying those on yourself regularly to see where you have missed. Not everybody has a really good CMDB. Not everybody has the ability to understand what are the underlying dependencies in low-level libraries within all of their applications. So constantly checking your environment for this is going to be really important.
And I was seeing somewhere that there are currently botnets already doing a basically scanning of the internet for basically system with vulnerabilities for various reasons, right? So it's not, as you mentioned, that the scope of it is tremendous, right? So some botnets are looking to see if they can run mining, like for cryptocurrency. Some of them are potentially taking over machines for DDoS attacks. I mean, it's almost like endless possibility of exploits, and these bots are continuously running, looking for these for these vulnerable machines, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think now say yes, and I think what you're going to see is a ton of scanning activity that's occurring right now. But you're already starting to see the scanning activity tapering off. And that's because anyone can start running these scans. I think the real threat is going to be initial access brokers that have already found a way to burrow into your organization. They've already gained initial access into your environment. And now what they have is an incredibly quick and easy way to gain code execution, which starts the process of lateral movement and elevating their privileges, and then achieving some critical impact. And so yes, how can somebody come in from the outside and gain that initial access? I think that is attack scenario one. And the industry, I think, is doing a lot of work, and customers are, to prevent that initial access. What I get more worried about is assume initial access, now what? And Log4j becomes a very quick, easy, very difficult to defend method for lateral movement, privilege escalation, and then achieving a critical impact. I think that's where you're going to see a lot more of the news, and big breaches will be through an initial access broker of some type, and then using Log4j to accelerate privilege escalation.
Yeah, and I'd like to dive a little bit in terms of what Horizon 3 can do to mitigate. And before we do that, maybe just elevate the discussion to the overall open source. There always was this conception of open source being more secure since it's open and anybody can, and I see nodding, everybody can potentially hack it and try to see if they can exploit it. But this is a perfect example for not being the case, right? And on top of that, the people that are maintaining the Log4j, right, they are potentially just doing it for free. That there's a team out there that's responsible for that. So what is kind of the future for open source, and how can companies continuously use these these type of code, but without facing the risk of something like that happening again?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So, having both Tony and I have spent so much time looking at open source and users of open source, but the reality is open source projects are not all equal. You take Linux and you look at the number of contributors, the number of researchers, and the number of eyes on that source code base. Linux is probably the most secure code in the world, right? When you think of the number of people that have assessed its security posture and then have used it and hardened it and so on. But not every project out there is Linux. And I think, even to my surprise, I've been using Log4j since it first came out when I was a Java developer at IBM. To my surprise, to learn that it was only 3 people part-time maintaining this particular project, and even at its peak, it wasn't a whole lot, was staggering and stunning. And this is part of the challenge. We see this with supply chain risk in general, where developers are quickly incorporating open source libraries, whether it's new Python libraries that are actually malicious in nature, and we've seen a bunch of those come out, or in this case, a poorly or insufficient, I'm gonna say poorly, an insufficiently maintained open source project that went viral and was all over the place. And you think about the placement and access that Log4j gives attackers. Now my next question or next research should be, what are the other Log4j-like open source components where you've got significant placement and access all over your enterprise, combined with insufficient maintenance? And those become the really high-risk supply chain attack vectors that we need to be paying attention to. But I think that everyone's a bit surprised that while certain open source projects are impeccable, you look at the code quality of Tomcat, the code quality of Linux, and elsewhere, it's outstanding, better than what any commercial software company could have delivered themselves. But then the bulk of the open source projects, I think, are in the insufficiently maintained category, like Log4j. And I think we just woke up to a tremendous amount of risk in our environment that most people weren't appropriately characterizing.
It's a great point.
I'll jump in there real quick too. The community around a particular project it's really important, and most of the good open source projects understand that security is hugely important, and the more folks that can look at it give us the ability to have multiple eyes staring at these these code bases to find places where they're vulnerable. When you close source it makes that a little bit more difficult, but it's still possible. But the fact that it's easier with an open source project to find vulnerabilities, get a CVE for it, and fix it, I think is really important. But I do 100% agree with Snehal that not all open source projects are created equal. So yeah.
So what can you do? I mean, this is not going to be the end all of vulnerabilities. It's going to be continuous. First of all, this, as you mentioned, it was going to be the long tail, so it's going to be, the effect of it is going to last for a long time. What can companies do? And it's all about prioritization, especially with minimizing risk, right? what can companies do to figure out what is kind of the best bang for the buck and where to start? And there was a question here, and I'll bring it up because it's probably very valid for what we're talking about, is the mandate to apply the patch by the 24th of December for federal users. Maybe we can kind of
I'll
answer
kind of
both
start
these.
there. I see those kinds of mandates, and I just don't understand how that's even possible. For one, what exactly are you patching? Your custom applications? Sure. You could rapidly deploy. Log4j is a pretty stable component. The interfaces, you're not going to break your application usually if you upgrade Log4j to the next version. But all of the commercial off-the-shelf applications that may or may not have this problem, I mean, some of those applications are in environments that you can't quickly and easily patch, and that's assuming you even know that it's a problem. I think a lot of vendors still haven't at least publicly announced that their products have an issue, and where the community is still uncovering it. And so I just don't. I mean, yeah, we can make this mandate of the 24th of December we have to apply patches, but the reality is that one, that's not going to stop the problem. We've already seen the patches that came out have been easily worked around. We've seen a patch get pushed and then realize it didn't actually solve the problem. We saw another patch or another discovery where it was a low, and as Tony said earlier, it got elevated to a high. So applying a patch by the 24th is, while it'll create the muscle memory for patching quickly, I don't think that's actually going to have a material impact on the exploitability of this
Yeah,
problem.
all of this ties back to visibility and understanding your environment, and it's something that organizations struggle with just significantly. In the service, I thought, when I was in the Air Force and working on all the systems that I worked on, I thought, okay, in the government space, there's a lot going on. Visibility is a struggle for us too. I'm sure that somebody has solved this problem in the commercial space, and the answer is no. We still haven't solved this, like, step number one of understanding your environment, of visibility. What's in my environment? What's going on in my environment? And those are things that attackers love living in, because if you don't know about it, you're not monitoring it. I can still leverage it. I don't have to be quiet. I can be as loud as I want trying to attack this thing, and I'll never get caught. So visibility and discovering where all of these assets are that are running these is going to be a problem for a really long time. And I agree with Snehal. Yes, put it out. It's awesome. We're going to mandate that that's the case, but the reality of it is far from that.
Yeah, and I'd like to also bring up the point that you brought up, that patching requires a kind of a closed loop, right? So you patch a system. How do you then verify it has been patched? And then I even saw somewhere where the actual patch had the vulnerability. So it's like
it's actually funny. I'll tell kind of two stories. One is back to Tony's point. Rob Joyce, when he was at TAO at NSA, gave this talk at the Enigma conference a few years ago. There's a line he said that has really stuck with me ever since, which is, he said, at TAO, we rarely have to use 0 days, because oftentimes we know more about the environment than our target does. It's like we've taken the time to conduct significant reconnaissance, mapped out every host, port, service, understood how they tie together, and oftentimes we understand the environment better than the defender does. And that's how they, for the most part, operate. It was just a great talk. For those that haven't heard it, just Google Rob Joyce Enigma conference, and I think it's out on YouTube. But that's something that really stuck with me for a few years, and in fact, that underpinned the design for Node Zero. And when Tony and I started the company, which is the first thing Node Zero does, which is what we do in Node Zero is autonomous pen testing. And Tony talked about it. There's a find, fix, verify, aha moment that we've really optimized for, where you run Node Zero as an autonomous pen test to find a bunch of problems. You then use the path, proof, and impact that we've surfaced to go fix those issues. And then you rerun Node Zero to verify that those problems have truly been fixed. And it's this aha moment that becomes very addictive for our customers, and they shift from wanting one pen test a year to one pen test a day, or one pen test on every single DevOps deployment. And that frequency of find, fix, verify allows you to quickly buy down all of the security debt that you've accrued over time, because you've got this fast feedback loop. And so, David, to your point on how do you verify, we were working with a customer, separate issue, And they swore for 18 months, zero logon had been patched. Every tool said it was patched. Qualys reports said it was patched. But when they ran node 0, we were able to exploit zero logon and grab the path, proof, and impact. And as we surfaced that to them, their fixers, their network engineers said, there's no way. I know for sure it's patched because every tool says this isn't an issue anymore. And then we came in and said, no, like, here's the proof. And we had one of our guys actually exploit it live so they could see it. And as we double click what happened, at the very last step, Cylance, I believe it was Cylance, blocked the patch from actually being applied on that particular system. But all the registries had been updated. So for all the superficial scanners said it was okay, but the actual binary hadn't been changed. And the only way to know that that was really the case is to do the attack and the exploitation. And so what this customer did was they have Patch Tuesday, and that they now have Pen Test Wednesday. And they use that to verify from an attacker's point of view that they are truly exploitable or not exploitable, and that they fix the issues that they intended to fix.
And that's a great leadway to the question here from the audience is like, how do you then do that in a non-invasive way? And a lot of organizations probably are wary about having somebody like a third party pen tester application on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, it's there's different degrees of hesitance that we've run into, but there's mostly degrees of embracing. So the embracing is those that want to find and fix problems before criminals exploit them. They tend to be the ones that work with us the fastest, and oftentimes we have a 6 to 8 week sales cycle with the product because people would rather find and fix these problems before the holidays versus during the holidays, right? In this example, think of SolarWinds and so on. Separately, though, when you think about the challenge questions here or the pushback, I'm afraid you're going to break something. Well, one, we do a lot of work to make sure that our pen tests are benign, so we don't make your day worse. But Tony talks about it as you've got Chaos Monkey from Netflix, like chaos security. I would rather know that I'm highly sensitive to a denial of service attack because I've got a poorly configured or poorly architected component that a pen test could surface. I would rather know that ahead of time than dealing with the denial of service attack during Black Friday and retail or something else. So there's a level of, stick your head in the sand and hope everything goes away. And, for the most part, we'll just wait for those organizations to get hit and then deal with their replacements as they all get fired. Most of the people we work with tend to want to proactively find and fix these problems and proactively harden their environments before they get put in the news.
Yeah,
go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I'll jump in and add some more color to that. We make sure that we're not knocking things over. We want to not make your day worse. But to what Snehal was talking about, IT operations is starting to pick up on the idea of site reliability engineering, which was a Google implementation of DevOps. And some of the philosophies there are automate your job away. 100% uptime is an impossibility, and we need to accept that and make today better than make tomorrow better than today. And they implement it in a way that if we don't understand the resiliency of our architectures, we are never going to know. And to have a fragile and brittle revenue stream, and if we want to talk the business side of it, yes, it's ones and data moving from here to there, but in today's world, the revenue stream is what's affected when your systems are down. And if you're not putting the resources and the understanding into how resilient are we, it's brittle and it will blindside you. And it's much worse getting blindsided than it is knowing that this is something that we are doing right now and this happens to be a thing. On the security side of it, NIST actually just published, this was a little while ago, 800-160-2 V2. I'll have to look it up and I'll send it out on my LinkedIn. But and it establishes the cyber resiliency engineer. And cyber resiliency engineering is going down the same lines as the site reliability engineering, but more focused on the resiliency of cybersecurity and how that affects the business and how that affects the business the revenue stream. So in security, those concepts are starting to pick up, and I love it. Site reliability engineering is amazing, and if you think about your architectures that way, you're going to be much better off. The same thing on the cyber side. If you are afraid of a malformed packet disrupting your value stream, then your value stream is very, very fragile, and you should understand that. And understanding it in a controlled scenario, vice when nobody knows what's going on and it could be malicious, is far better than the other scenarios. So that's my take on that side of it. But Node Zero is absolutely safe to run in production.
Yeah, I'll kind of leave with one question that I struggle with when I first joined any organization as a CIO or DoD and elsewhere, which is, if an application crashes or if my router crashes, is it because somebody did a misconfiguration or is it because of a cyber attack? That initial triage of why is my environment wobbly or why is my environment having issues, you've got to be able to clearly and crisply understand this is because of a change that went in, or this is because of some likely cyber attack. To answer that question as quickly and authoritatively as possible, as you start to unwind, that requires you to have a robust understanding of your change management processes. It requires you to have a robust understanding of your failure modes and kind of your failure risk modeling. It also requires you to have a robust understanding of your early indicators and warnings for a cyber attack, and as well as your cyber resilience. But that initial triage point of, did this router crash because of a misconfiguration or a cyber attack? Most organizations cannot answer that question quickly and effectively, which if they can't answer that quickly and effectively, they're absolutely going to be reactive and blindsided constantly. And that's really the shift of applying an SRE mindset to both the resilience of your IT systems and the resilience of from a security standpoint, both of which directly reduce your business operations risk.
Yeah, and I think it's also about level of maturity for some of these organizations in terms of, what is the process of them to look at the applications and where they open to monitor these on the outside and so on. And what's amazing about this particular vulnerability, it was so widely published. CNN, CNBC. There's an article on Time magazine. It's just incredible, and so it's becoming more and more of a senior management discussion as well. And what's your take on the fact that there's a lot of Me Too's, in the sense that there's a lot of vendors out there that are saying, at least claiming, and you're smiling because where I'm going with this is they're saying, okay, you have to now deploy our solution, and we're going to help you with this, going to solve all your problems. You are, unlike those companies, are well positioned because you're specifically targeting that issue of patching systems. So what's your take on this whole industry just getting a shock to its system right now?
I think that in the security industry, and I sometimes joke about woke Twitter as part of this, but honestly, the security community in Twitter has been outstanding at identifying and amplifying and sharing lessons learned amongst security issues. But the commercial side of the security industry drives me nuts, because most of them are ambulance chasers. And when you've got a problem that comes out, the first thing they talk about is, hey, my product could have stopped that. That's not what we need right now. We don't need spam emails on how we need to rapidly buy your product to fix this magical issue. What we need is, help me characterize the risk, help me prioritize what to fix and how to fix it, and help me get back to my family during the holidays. That should be the mindset of every security professional during this time, whether you work for a big company or not. The culture within Horizon 3, almost everybody in the company is a former practitioner. So we've all been in the shoes of the people that are having to defend their systems at the moment. And so that level of empathy of not wanting to be an ambulance chaser culturally becomes really important. Everything we did was around, our goal is to help inform, educate, and provide guidance, whether it's from our product or any other product, doesn't matter. Inform, educate, and provide some level of guidance to the community wherever we can, so that we can help our practitioners get over this crisis and then let them get back to to their normal kind of holiday spirit and cheer. And I see one of the questions in here around SCADA systems and these other environments. This goes back to the long tail. The real threats are going to be initial access brokers that use this problem to gain access to your Hadoop environment, your Elastic environment, your WebSphere ZOS environment, your Kix, or DB2 on the mainframe environments. These super sensitive middleware services that, for the most part, you didn't have to pay much attention to previously. That's one big part of the long tail. The other part of the long tail is going to be the initial access brokers and other borrowing that's going to allow very sensitive systems, ICS systems and SCADA systems, to be quickly jeopardized. And it'll occur so quickly that most defenders are not going to be able to see the alerts, characterize the risk of those alerts, and then stifle the code execution of lateral movement because of how quick and easy it is to compromise and exploit this particular problem.
Yeah,
go ahead.
David, I'll jump in on
Yep.
two things there. One thing that I want to make sure is clear is, as this thing continues to get exploited, it's significantly easy to. One of the first things that happens is we're going to take environmental variables. A lot of applications are going to use. They're going to store sensitive information in memory within a system because it's not usually accessible. What we're finding is we are able to then dump credentials from that space. And then from there, even if we can't go any further from that standpoint, we now have credentials that we can tie to a particular target and understand now where else can we use those. AWS keys, Azure secrets, CI/CD secrets, those types of things are going to be everywhere now. So assume breach on that side of it, and be careful of those things. So you're going to want to be looking on that side of it. On the lost my train of thought. Lost it.
I wanted just to add, you touch upon a great point. We have to be thankful for all these practitioners right now, the network admins, the people that are, have lost basically their holidays. I think we don't thank them enough. It's these people are responsible for keeping this whole digital economy going. I almost want to, do a 30 seconds of silence maybe for, sharing and solidarity. Maybe we'll do that right now so people don't go away. We'll do 30 seconds and we'll go back into discussion. That's it. So I wanted to just maybe end or kind of wrap up with a more lighter note. I find the community to be tremendous, both from an inclusion perspective, from sharing perspective, with tremendous insight. So, the one thing that really came out really quick was the Log4j meme page, which I thought was for all those that are staying home and away from the family, going back to the office, this was probably kind of comic relief. And there's some pretty interesting ones that are quite quite funny. Anything in particular, like look at this one, for example. Me before Log4j discovered, and then the weekend after.
One of my favorites is the one where it's the person. It's the cartoon where the person is sleeping, and the brain says, "Is Log4j on my toaster?" And then it's sleeping, and then he wakes up and he's looking on his phone to make sure. That one's probably my favorite.
I love this one. The starting with breaking the Minecraft servers, and then there's a domino here for the entire internet on fire. I thought this was very, very clever.
Yeah, there's some good ones on there.
So super interesting. And so the sky is not falling, right? We are most likely going to do this again sometime soon, right? So, how do we wrap this up? What are kind of the best practices to, you wake up Monday morning come around, how do you kind of work towards defining what needs to be patched and moving on to kind of the, to business as usual? What's the easiest
Yeah,
way?
I'll start, and then I love giving Snehal the last line because he is just amazing at the last lines. But what CISA put out is really important, and everybody should be doing it. It is discover, patch, and isolate, and then monitor for the odd things that are coming out of there. There's a lot more that you need to be doing. That's not all you should be doing. The system, we talked about system to system kind of discussions and things, understanding where the data is going to find more pieces of Log4j that you aren't aware of, and then reviewing application architectures, and then continuously running and doing penetration testing and searching for it within your environment. There's going to be a lot of checks that continuously come out, a lot of tools that are being developed by the community. And when I said I lost my train of thought, I wanted to go back and talk about the community itself and how security practitioners are joining together to help the world solve this problem, to try and be ahead of all of the attackers that are out there who are doing this maliciously. So yes, I'm thankful that you did that, that silence, not just the security practitioners, but also the IT operations folks and all the folks who are supporting technology within the environment. So the last thing I would say is take care of those folks, because they are saving the internet from literally catching the world on fire. So thank you to them.
Nice. Yeah, I'll kind of end with 2 points. One a little bit more tactical, and the other a little more strategic. So more tactically, a good security program assumes initial access. They assume initial compromise, that an attacker is gonna get in one way or the other because there are so many doors and windows available for them to sneak through into your environment. And that a good security program, after assuming initial access, focuses their time and energy on detecting and stifling lateral movement, detecting and stifling privilege escalation, and detecting and stifling any critical impacts like sensitive data exfil and other things from being achieved. And that's really a good security program kind of focuses on those 3 things in particular. And in addition to the broader ideas of your credential policy and password policy, also, but those 3 very specifically, what this vulnerability does is puts even more pressure on making sure that just assume they're going to get in. They've already borrowed initial access, they are going to get in. Assessing your perimeter, while interesting, that is not going to be what puts you in the news. It's once they're in, stifling lateral movement to prevent them from compromising your critical data stores or gaining access to domain admin and then having the keys to the kingdom. So making sure you understand your soft, squishy center on the internal pen testing side, like that to me, I think is going to become what makes or breaks an organization in 2022 from being in the news or not being in the news. Did they only focus on the hard shell of that egg and ignored everything inside? Realizing that there's many ways to break in, or do they actually focus on hardening the interior to detect and stifle lateral movement, detect and stifle privilege escalation, and so on, and to containment? Exactly right. That's the I think the immediate part and what I think is going to happen in 22. More broadly, there's some laws in Europe that I think are passed or about to get passed that shifts the liability of the security posture of your software to the vendor. And if that happens, that is a game changer. I remember at IBM, where when I was a developer on WebSphere, we've got 30 days before we're supposed to GA the code, and we had 100 or 200 security problems to go fix. And the executives would say, you don't have to ship those security fixes. We need to get this code out on time in order to meet our revenue targets, which is a testament to the security quality of IBM software. But that's a whole other conversation. But that's because there was no penalty for shipping insecure code. And so what I think is starting to happen in various governments, whether I think the EU is going to be the start to do it, or first to do it, but I've already seen these conversations on the Hill here in the US too, is vendors are going to start being held liable for the security quality of their code, which forces and incentivizes them to make sure they are actually shipping quality security code to their users. And if that happens, I think that is going to have a profound impact on the open source community, because that individual contributor that is building the 3-person Log4j project could suddenly be held liable for the security posture of their code as it gets incorporated into bigger applications. And so I think more strategically, this transfer of liability from the customer of software to the provider of software will have ripple effects throughout the entire digital ecosystem. And I think that 2025, that digital ecosystem looks very different. Honestly, it probably looks much more like it did in the early 80s, where you had more packaged software and less community-driven development because of this liability concern.
Tony, you were absolutely spot on. I don't think I can add anything to Snehal impactful wrap up here. It's almost going to deter anything from what I'm going to say. So just to wrap up here, what is the best way to reach you guys for advice, insight, looking into the the Node Zero and anything else that come to mind? What's the easiest way?
Go ahead, Snehal.
Yeah. So once again, not to be ambulance chasers, for free without any commercial expectation, you can go run a find, fix, verify pen test against your environment to make sure you understand what you look like through the eyes of the attacker, and start to fix problems that truly matter. Being vulnerable doesn't mean you're exploitable, and you need to prioritize where you are actually exploitable. And so, once again, anything we can do through the Node Zero technology, you can just go to the horizon3.ai website, log in with your Google or LinkedIn ID, no commercial expectation, and just go run it. That's kind of one thing, so you can characterize that risk. And honestly, the hardest part of your job right now as a practitioner is deciding what not to fix. And you've got to use what is exploitable as part of that prioritization. And then how does that exploitation lead to a critical impact of your crown jewels? Like, that's where you've really got to focus, and then kind of further prioritize from there. So that's kind of number one. Number two is we're doing our best to convey any finding or any piece of insight that we come up with through our Horizon 3 Twitter handles, through our LinkedIn posts, through the website. Once again, it's all about trying to bring both the map and the compass to the security community wherever we can. And so we don't want to add more noise to the problem. So we try to focus on the parts of the problem where we don't think people are paying much attention to yet, which is assume compromise, now what? Or, hey, what about your non-Java based applications? And so on. So the horizon3.ai website, there's a rapid link that'll get you to our Log4Shell page with as much detail and that page is being updated every hour by the team.
Thank you very much. I feel like we should do this again, Snehal and Tony, because since it's a moving target and things really change. Maybe like even a shorter version of this when we respond to some questions I'm sure people are going to have. But thank you very much for joining today. It's been very impactful. Looking forward to potentially seeing you in person in New York City sometime in the new year. And then until then, everybody who joined, thank you very much. And looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care and be safe.
Thanks, David.
Take care.